What happens when a master of charm, whose questions have unraveled the mighty, faces an actor who thrives on chaos? The studio lights hummed, casting a soft glow on two chairs, one velvet, one leather, a small glass table between them reflecting the sheen of expectation. On the set of the Norton Hour, the air was thick with anticipation, the faint whir of three cameras wide, mid on the guest, close on the host, blending with the rustle of papers and the clipped whispers of the crew. A chipped porcelain cup, left by a hurried intern, sat on the table, its hairline fracture catching the light like a silent prophecy. Graham Norton adjusted his tie, his fingers brushing the silk with a practiced calm. At 59, he'd hosted presidents, pop stars, and pariahs, his lilting Irish brogue disarming even the most guarded. Tonight, his guest was Willem Crane, a mercurial actor whose performances oscillated between genius and unhinged. Crane's latest film, The Hollow Crown, had sparked Oscars buzz but also whispers of on-set tirades. Graham's job was simple: peel back the myth, expose the man. He tapped his pen against his notes, a faint rhythm betraying a flicker of fatigue from a week of back-to-back tapings. Just keep him talking, he thought. He'll unravel himself. The studio audience, a modest crowd of 200, stirred as the floor manager signaled. The red light on camera 1 blinked. Graham leaned forward, his smile warm but his eyes sharp. "Willem Crane, what a delight to have you," he said, his voice a velvet hook. "How's London treating you?" Crane, slouched in the leather chair, offered a lopsided grin. His wiry frame seemed coiled, his black blazer unbuttoned, revealing a scar just above his collarbone, a jagged line that vanished under fabric. "London's a beast," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "It chews you up, spits you out, and you thank it." The audience chuckled, but his eyes didn't join the laugh. They flicked to the lights, then back to Graham, sizing him up. A microphone wire snaked across his lapel, catching faintly on his breath. Graham nodded, his pen stilling. "You've been in the game a long time, those early theater days in New York, scrappy, raw. What's it like now, carrying the weight of all this expectation?" His tone was light, but the question carried an edge, probing the mythos Crane had built, the tortured artist, the method actor who lived his roles. Crane's fingers twitched on the armrest. "Expectation's a trap," he said, leaning forward, elbows on knees. "You don't carry it. You burn it down." A ripple of applause from the audience, but Graham caught the microbeat, Crane's left hand, briefly trembling, before he clasped it with the other. Vulnerable, just for a second, Graham thought. He scribbled a note, the pen's scratch audible in the pause. Camera 2 zoomed to a mid-shot, catching Crane's sharp cheekbones and the faint sheen of sweat. "Fair enough," Graham said, his smile unwavering. "But let's talk about The Hollow Crown. Critics are calling it your best work yet. Was it liberating, diving into such a broken character?" The question was a soft lob, but Graham's eyes held a glint of intent, testing the waters. Crane's jaw tightened, then relaxed. "Broken," he said, tilting his head. He wasn't broken. He was free. People don't get that freedom looks like madness to cowards. The audience murmured, some nodding, others exchanging glances. A woman in the front row tapped her phone, the screen's glow catching a producer's eye backstage. Graham let the silence linger, the faint hum of the studio lights filling the gap. He's deflecting already, he thought. The interview drifted to safer ground: Crane's childhood in upstate New York, his mother's poetry, his first role at 16. Each answer was articulate but guarded, laced with aphorisms that sounded rehearsed. "Acting's just lying with purpose," Crane said at one point, earning a laugh. But Graham noticed the microbeats, a swallowed sigh, a glance at the chipped cup, as if it held answers. The actor was performing, curating his truth. Graham's pen tapped again, a metronome of patience. Then came the pivot. Graham leaned back, his voice softening, a velvet glove over steel. "Willem, you've built this incredible career, this aura. But there's talk, whispers, really, about the cost. The stories from sets, the intensity. Some say it's passion, others call it chaos. Where's the line for you?" Camera 3 tightened on Graham's face, catching the faint crease of his brow, a flicker of empathy masking calculation. Crane's smile vanished. He shifted, the leather chair creaking under him. The line, he said, his voice low, deliberate. There's no line. Art demands everything. You don't get to half-ass truth. His fingers drummed the armrest, a staccato counterpoint to the studio's hum. The audience stilled, sensing the shift. A producer in the control room whispered into a headset, the sound muffled but audible, "Keep rolling, don't cut." Graham pressed further, his tone still polite but now incisive. But that intensity, it's not just art, is it? It's people. Crew members, co-stars. There've been reports shouting matches, walk-offs. Does that weigh on you, the human cost? The question hung like a blade, its edge moral but not accusatory. Camera 1 pulled back, capturing both men, Graham, composed, his hands folded, Crane, rigid, his scar seeming to pulse under the lights. Crane's eyes narrowed, but a flash of something regret crossed his face before he masked it with a laugh. People love their stories, he said, leaning forward, his voice sharp. They want a villain, so they make one. I don't owe anyone comfort. I owe them truth. His words were a shield, but his knuckles whitened on the chair's edge. Graham caught it, filing it away. He's wounded, but he won't show it. The conversation turned to privacy, the subtext thickening. You've spoken about control, Graham said, his voice almost gentle. You said, privacy is the last bastion of freedom. But you're out there, Willem films, red carpets, interviews like this. Isn't visibility a kind of theft? The question was a trap, wrapped in empathy. The chipped cup gleamed under the lights, a silent witness. Crane bristled, his posture stiffening. Visibility's a currency, he snapped. You spend it, or it spends you. But don't mistake exposure for truth. I choose what I show. His voice cracked on the last word, a hairline fracture like the cups. The audience shifted, a collective rustle of anticipation. A crew member adjusted a boom mic, its faint whine cutting the air. Graham's pen paused, his pulse quickening. Here it comes, he thought. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper, every word deliberate. But Willem, when you choose what to show, and it hurts others, your colleagues, your fans, even yourself, don't you ever wonder if that truth you're chasing, is it worth the wreckage? The moral pivot landed like a stone in still water. The studio inhaled, the air taut. Camera 2 caught Crane's face, a flicker of rage, then something softer, fear, before his eyes hardened. Crane's breath quickened, a sharp hiss through his teeth. His fist tightened on the armrest, the leather squeaking. The microphone wire trembled, amplifying the sound. The chipped cup sat untouched, its crack glinting like a warning. Graham held his gaze, unflinching, as the lights hummed and the camera's word, waiting for the explosion. The studio held its breath, the air thick with the weight of Graham Norton's final question. Willem Crane's fist clenched on the leather armrest, the squeak piercing the silence. His breath hissed, sharp and ragged, as the microphone wire quivered against his blazer. The chipped porcelain cup on the glass table caught the studio lights, its hairline crack a silent echo of the moment's fracture. Camera 2 lingered on Crane's face, his eyes blazing, then softening for a fleeting second before hardening into defiance. Crane stood, the chair scraping against the polished floor, a sound like a blade on stone. You think you get to judge me, he said, his voice low but venomous, each word a dart. You, sitting there with your clean suit and your clean questions, carving me up for your audience? He gestured sharply at the crowd, who gasped, some leaning forward, phones glowing as they recorded. The wide shot caught the ripple of shock, a producer in the control room mouthing, "Don't cut, don't cut." Graham remained still, his hands folded, his face a mask of calm. But his pulse thrummed, a faint memory surfacing, a long-ago interview, a politician who'd stormed off, leaving Graham to salvage the segment. Not this time, he thought. I'm not judging, Willem, he said, his voice steady, almost mournful. I'm asking if the cost, their cost, is worth it. Camera 3 tightened on his eyes, catching a flicker of fatigue, a man who'd seen too many egos unravel. Crane paced, a caged animal, his scar glinting as he passed under a spotlight. Worth it, he spat, turning to face Graham. You don't know what it's like to bleed for this. To give everything and have it twisted into gossip, into lies. His voice cracked, and for a moment, his shoulders slumped, a confession of exhaustion. The audience stilled, sensing the vulnerability, but Crane caught himself, straightening. You want wreckage? Look at this circus. He waved at the cameras, the crew, the lights humming faintly overhead. Graham leaned forward, his pen still on his notes. Then why come here, Willem? Why sit in this chair if it's all a circus? His tone was gentle but unrelenting, a surgeon's precision. The chipped cup gleamed, its crack seeming to widen in the light. A crew member adjusted a camera, its motor whirring softly, while a woman in the audience whispered to her neighbor, their silhouettes sharp against the glow of a phone screen. Crane stopped pacing, his eyes locking onto Graham's. Because I'm not afraid of you, he said, his voice a low growl. I'm not afraid of your questions or your moral traps. I came to show them, he jabbed a finger at the audience, who I am. But his hand trembled, betraying the bravado. Camera 1 pulled back, capturing the tableau, Crane standing, Graham seated, the table a fragile barrier between them. The tension snapped like a taut wire. Crane turned, striding toward the stage's edge, his footsteps sharp against the floor. The audience gasped, a collective intake, as he ripped the microphone from his lapel, the wire snapping with a faint pop. I'm done, he said, not to Graham but to the void, his voice raw. He tossed the mic onto the table, where it clattered against the chipped cup, sending a tremor through the glass. The wide shot caught the moment, the cup wobbling, threatening to fall. Graham rose, his movements deliberate, his voice cutting through the chaos. Willem, you can walk away, but the truth doesn't. The line landed like a stone, and Crane froze, 1 foot on the stage's edge. His back was to the audience, but camera 2 caught his profile, jaw clenched, scar pulsing under the lights. For a moment, he seemed poised to turn back, to fire one last salvo. But he didn't. He stepped into the shadows, the stage door slamming behind him, a sound that echoed like a gunshot. The studio erupted. Audience members whispered, their phones flashing as they typed furiously, the glow illuminating their faces. A producer's voice crackled through the control room's speakers, barely audible, go to commercial, now. The cameras swiveled, one catching Graham as he sank back into his chair, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd held. His fingers brushed the chipped cup, steadying it. Too far? He wondered, a flicker of doubt crossing his mind. But the audience's murmurs drowned it out, a tide of excitement and judgment. Backstage, the fallout began. A junior producer scrolled through her phone, her face pale as she read the first wave of posts on X. Willem Crane storms off Norton. #epic fail. Another showed a blurry clip of the mic toss, already looping online. The control room buzzed, staff exchanging glances, some thrilled, others uneasy. This'll be gold for ratings, one whispered. Or a lawsuit, another replied. The chipped cup, forgotten on the table, sat under the lights, its crack a quiet monument to the chaos. Graham stayed on set, the cameras still rolling for the wrap-up. He forced a smile, his voice smooth as he addressed the audience. Well, that was unexpected, he said, earning a nervous laugh. But that's live television. Isn't it? He glanced at the stage door, half expecting Crane to return, but the shadows remained empty. Camera 3 caught his expression, a mix of resolve and regret, as he transitioned to the next segment, his professionalism a shield. Hours later, alone in his dressing room, Graham sat with a glass of water, the chipped cup inexplicably in his hand. He turned it, tracing the crack with his thumb. The online storm was raging now, ex-posts calling Crane unhinged, others praising his defiance, a few accusing Graham of ambush journalism. He sighed, setting the cup down. Did I push too hard? The question lingered, unanswered, as his phone buzzed with a producer's text, network wants a follow-up. You in? Across town, Crane sat in a dimly lit bar, his phone dark to avoid the deluge of notifications. The scar on his collarbone itched, a reminder of a childhood fight he'd never shared, not even tonight. He'd wanted to, for a fleeting moment, when Graham's questions had cut too close. But vulnerability was a luxury he couldn't afford. He sipped his drink, the ice clinking, and muttered to himself, truth doesn't walk away. It waits. The bartender glanced over, but Crane's eyes were on the glass, reflecting the faint neon glow. The night's consequences rippled outward. The audience members who'd filmed the clash saw their clips go viral, their follower count spiking. The producer who'd whispered "don't cut" was already pitching a special, Inside the Crane Meltdown. And the chipped cup, cleared from the set, was tossed into a bin, its crack unnoticed by the crew. But for Graham and Crane, the moment lingered, a wound neither could fully close. Graham would face the cameras again, his questions sharper but warier. Crane would return to set, his defiance a shield, but the scar, literal and not, would ache a little longer. The truth, as Graham had said, didn't walk away. It sat in the silence, in the hum of the lights, in the crack of a forgotten cup, waiting for the next stage.